Have you ever noticed something very strange? There is a generation that was raised on phrases like, just keep trying and things will work out. Just study hard and the future will open up. Just live kindly, work hard, get a degree, have goals, and sooner or later you will have a stable life. But then that same generation grew up and discovered a very painful truth. They did almost everything right, and life still did not open up the way it was promised. That is millennials. People born from 1981 to 1996. A generation that is not lazy at all, not lacking in effort either. And yet they are constantly seen as if they are the problem. They are criticized for being too sensitive, criticized for asking for too much, criticized for complaining too much, criticized for job hopping, criticized for not being able to buy a house while still acting like they have life figured out. But maybe the problem is not them. Maybe the problem is that they were handed an old map and then forced to walk through a world that had completely changed. Millennials grew up in a very particular time. They were taught to believe in themselves, to believe that they had value, to believe that their future was in their own hands. This was not a bad thing. On the contrary, it came from good intentions. Many parents wanted their children to be more confident than the generation before them. They wanted their children to be less wounded. They wanted them to dream big. So an entire generation was filled with one powerful belief. You are special. You can do it. You deserve a good life. But then real life arrived. And it arrived hard. Many of them graduated right when the 2008 financial crisis hit. They left school not into a world full of opportunity, but into a labor market that had shrunk, turned cold, and become brutally competitive. Entry-level jobs demanded experience. Stable jobs became scarcer. The cost of college soared. Student debt became a burden that lasted for years, even decades. And that is when a huge contradiction appeared. From childhood, they were taught that effort would lead to results. But when they became adults, they discovered that effort no longer guaranteed that. This is exactly when the mind begins to crack. In psychology, there is a concept called cognitive dissonance. It means that two conflicting beliefs exist in your mind at the same time. One says, I did everything right. The other says, and the outcome is still wrong. And when that state lasts long enough, people do not just become disappointed, they begin to doubt themselves. Why am I trying this hard and still getting nowhere? Am I really not good enough? Was everything I believed growing up wrong? That is why so many millennials live with a sense of being stuck in between. On the outside, they still work, still try, still keep moving. But on the inside, there is a very clear feeling of losing their footing. They do not know whether they are losing because they are not good enough, or because the rules of the game changed a long time ago. What is ironic is that this generation also grew up alongside social media. Not from very early childhood like Gen Z, but right during the stage when they were forming their adult identities. Facebook appeared while they were still young. Instagram came when they were building their personal image careers and relationships. In other words, millennials did not just learn how to live, they also learned how to perform their lives in front of others. And this is where everything becomes exhausting. You do not just need to live well. You also have to look like you are living well. You do not just need to work hard. You also have to prove that you are making progress. You do not just need to exist. You also have to make that existence look valuable. Suddenly, every person became a marketing campaign for themselves. A LinkedIn profile stories work, photos, vacation photos, gym photos, study photos, healing photos, growth photos. Everything could turn into a soft but constant performance. And when your self-worth becomes tied too tightly to external feedback, the mind gets drained very easily. You start comparing yourself. You start feeling slower than everyone else. You start feeling like everyone is reaching the finish line except you, when the truth is that many people are only choosing the best angle to post. Then there is the issue of adulthood. In the past, people often felt like adults when they reached a few clear milestones: a stable job, marriage, buying a home, having children. But for many millennials, those milestones have been pushed far away. Not because they do not want them, but because they cannot reach them. Wages do not rise fast enough to match living costs. Rent takes up most of their income. Buying a home becomes a luxury goal. Marriage requires financial calculation. Having children requires even more careful calculation. So they pass 30, then 35, even 40, and still feel like their life has not truly begun. They go to work, pay bills, get tired, keep trying, but deep down, still feel like they are standing in the waiting room of a life that has not called their name yet. This is not a small feeling. It is a very dangerous kind of slow-burning stress. Not the kind that makes you collapse all at once, the kind that wears you down little by little. The body and mind keep preparing for a stable future that is supposed to arrive, but year after year, it still does not come. It is like staring at the loading bar of your life while it never moves. If you have ever felt "I'm already grown up, so why do I still not feel at peace?" comment the number 8. I want to know how many people have truly touched this feeling. Another very important point is that millennials are often criticized for job hopping, for lacking loyalty, for not being willing to stay committed. But if you look closely, it is not nearly as simple as people say. In the past, many companies promised long-term stability. If you stayed long enough, there would be rewards, a pension, a clear path upward. But the modern workplace has changed. Layoffs have become normal. Short-term contracts have increased. Benefits have been reduced. Many places treat people as replaceable parts. In an environment like that, workers becoming more flexible, leaving sooner, and prioritizing their own interests is not necessarily irresponsible. It may simply be a rational act of self-protection. In other words, they did not create the breakdown in the relationship between companies and employees. They are just the generation forced to live among that wreckage. That is also why millennials became such a strange generation. They are idealistic and skeptical at the same time. They still hope for a fairer society. They still want life to have meaning. They still want to do the right thing. But at the same time, they have increasingly lost faith in the systems that once promised to protect them. They are not entirely pessimistic. They have simply seen too clearly how everything works. That is why they question things so often, why they ask again, why they no longer place absolute trust in authority, tradition, or phrases like "just do it this way." Many people call that difficult. But it may also be the mark of a generation that has learned that not everything that has lasted a long time is necessarily right. What is worth mentioning is that this is also one of the most open generations when it comes to mental health. They talk about anxiety. They talk about depression. They talk about therapy. They talk about childhood wounds. They talk about burnout. They talk about personal boundaries. And that matters because it helped many people understand for the first time that suffering is not weakness. But what is the other side of that? It is that they are more aware of their problems, while their living conditions have not become any lighter. The debt is still there. Housing is still expensive. Work is still unstable. The pressure is still piling up. So a paradox appears: the more they understand themselves, the more they realize how much they are forcing themselves to carry. And then there is the future. Millennials are not just worried about their own survival. They also have to look at a world that is becoming more unstable. Climate change, economic turbulence, rising living costs, declining social trust, one crisis after another. They were told that they had to fix this world while they themselves do not hold much power or many resources to fix it. That feeling can easily push a person into helplessness. You know the problem is happening. You can see it clearly. You want to do something, but you do not have enough strength. And if a person lives in that state for too long, they can easily fall into a deep kind of exhaustion. Not because they do not care, but because they have cared for so long without seeing a way out. So when someone looks at millennials and asks, "Why are you all so anxious all the time?" the answer is actually not that hard. Because they were taught to believe very deeply, and then forced to live in a reality that shattered almost all of those beliefs. They are not weaker. They just have to adapt to a more unstable world. They are not lazier. They are simply exhausted from trying and trying while still not reaching even a basic sense of safety. They are not asking for too much. They are just the generation awake enough to realize that some old promises are no longer true. Maybe the fairest thing we can do for millennials is not to judge them, but to see clearly the conditions that created them. Once you do that, many things suddenly make sense. Why they are strong and fragile at the same time. Why they keep going while feeling worn out inside. Why they want to live well, but always carry a quiet, lingering fear underneath. Why they want to believe, yet no longer dare to believe fully. They are just human. And they are reacting in a completely normal way to a deeply abnormal era. If you have watched this far and feel that this video captures something many people have felt but never named, comment the number 9 so I know you want me to keep making topics like this. Thank you for watching until the end. If you found this video thought-provoking, please like and subscribe to support me. I will keep making content that is deep, clear, and honest like this for you.